Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Some Like It Plaid by Angela Quarles, narrated by Rachael Beresford. Chapter 1.
We need wives if we're to survive as a tribe.
Connall, son of Econ's aggravation, powered his words, but they blended in with the other shouts and exclamations in the keep's great hall. Frustration making his movements jerky, he stood, the sound of chair legs scraping against stone adding to the mayhem.
Hold your tongues, the lot of ye.
This time his voice rang out in the close confines. The council members, who'd been bickering for too long, hushed one by one, and all gazes turned to him. And one by one, each intent stare added to the burden of responsibility weighing on his heart. Even his father, the chief, raised a brow and leaned forward in his seat. As the leader's oldest surviving son, Connall's word carried authority, despite his mere 21 winters. He rounded on their spellcaster, Mungan, who was barely visible in the murky corner, and strode toward him.
This cannot continue. Find a solution. I need a wife, as do my brothers and the other men.
Well, I want my own back, damn you, shouted a warrior, whose face had the stiff mien of barely restrained sorrow.
I sympathize with your grief, my friend, but we are at an impasse.
Mungan's lanky frame unfolded from the darkened corner. He strode into the sun's rays streaming from one of the keep's windows, the light highlighting the gold-tooled patterns on his leather jerkin, crackling energy surrounding him. Even the dust motes seemed to dance in a pattern around his youthful face.
Aye, there is a way.
Mungan's rich tenor filled the room with portent. Cries of relief sounded, and Connall stepped forward.
Then, but there is a cost.
Mungan gripped his yew-staff and tamped it once on the stone floor. Unlike the other men in the tribe, he kept his dark brown hair cut close to his head.
Magic, especially magic of this potency.
His gaze swung to Connall's and held.
Always has a cost.
Chills raced along his skin, but he crossed his arms, pushing aside any unease the spellcaster's words caused. Mungan was the most powerful druid to emerge in their tribe in several generations. Connall trusted him with his life.
I'll pay it.
He'd pay anything. Their current situation was untenable. His responsibility to his people lay heavy on his heart, leaving him antsy, frustrated. Mungan nodded once, his eyes never leaving Connall's.
Then we must depart for Acnabrec at once to take advantage of the sun's last emanations. The winter solstice conveys the strongest magic. Make haste and pack for an extended journey.
With that, he pivoted and marched from the keep, his wool mantle swirling behind him. An indescribable pull tugged, as if he'd handed over his fate to the powerful, enigmatic man. Connall dragged in a deep breath to centre himself. No turning back now. The early setting sun stretched fingers of light over the nearby mountain peaks, a clear reminder of their need for haste. Connall relished the lash of the wind through his hair and the steady movement of his horse beneath him as he galloped along the wooden road to Acnabrec, one of their most sacred sites. His brothers, his father, Mungan, and several warriors rode with him. As they neared their destination, they slowed their pace to allow their horses to cool down. Connall stared into the distance, that pull of fate stronger the closer they came to Acnabrec, and the Druid's energy merged with its stronger one. Slate-grey clouds, tinged deep pink, streaked the horizon, foretelling of rain. Mungan drew alongside, matching his mount's trot to that of Connall's. Yu's staff secured to his back, Mungan leaned forward in his saddle to direct a concerned look his way, the mantle of responsibility he always wore still evident, but overshadowed with the warmth of familiarity and friendship they'd shared since they were lads.
"Remember heart, brother. I cannot guarantee where you'll end up."
He squared his shoulders.
"As long as there are women to wed, I'll be fine. Well, you'll be equipped with the tools you require. The magic will see to that only."
Mungan never hesitated to speak his mind before. As their leading druid, his opinion held equal weight to that of the chief.
"Tell me,"
Connall urged. He'd been given a lesson on what to expect and how the magic would work. Most of it didn't make sense, though he pretended to grasp it. A rare smile stretched across Mungan's face.
"You love adventure. Well, and adventure is what you'll get. No need to be afraid."
He slapped Connall on the back, then trotted to the path leading up to the site's edge. Connall would swear the spellcaster tossed a final word over his shoulder.
"Much."
Arse. His own horse stepped off the wooden road and threaded up the clearing of the squat hillside. What had he agreed to? When the others dismounted at the expanse of flat rock stretching over the ground, he swept his gaze over the incised circles and indentations, only those of Mungan's order comprehended. The wind blew stronger on this knoll, bringing with it the aroma of alder, peat, and the warm, sharp scent of deep, deep magic. A smell which triggered memories, ones he hadn't allowed himself to dwell on since he was a lad. His older brother and his playmates used to sport here, and he always tagged along, his heart full of yearning to join them. Guilt knifed him now, nearly bowing him forward in the saddle. He gritted his teeth. On the barrows of his ancestors' graves, he'd do what was right for the tribe's welfare. He'd failed them before, depriving them of his older brother. He wouldn't do so again. Mungan murmured into his horse's ear and stepped away. Its head bobbed once, as if in acknowledgement, sending a crawling sensation down Connall's spine. The spellcaster removed his saddlebag and stepped onto the incised rock, setting his burden down near the edge. Connall shivered in the pre-dusk winter air. The young druid poured liquid into some of the cups carved in the stone. In others, he pinched precise measurements of various herbs and plants, mixing them within. In another, he struck a flint and burned a bundle of twigs. A pungent, earthy smell wafted to the side of the clearing, making his nose twitch. With each inhale of its rich, heady scent, the magic strengthened and swelled. In other cups, Mungan placed yew staffs which, when complete, formed a circle. No one knew who'd carved into these rocks, but the druids claimed to know the intended purpose and how to harness its magic. He'd heard tales of journeying through the rock's magic, but it was a rare occurrence, one neither he nor his father's peers had ever witnessed.
"Stand here."
Mungan indicated a staff in direct line with the setting rays of the sun. Heart pounding, so hard it reverberated up his throat, Connall dismounted, grabbed his leather satchel, and did as instructed. His father, his brothers, and the rest of the attending warriors gathered around the edge and watched in silence, their faces ranging from grim to desolate. He would not let them down. He stood with the staff circles at his back, as straight as he was able, and lowered his chin, ready for whatever magic the Druid planned. If it found Connall a wife, he'd pay the price. The weak winter sun bathed his skin, mixing with the power in the air. Mungan stepped back and held his yew staff to the side, his gaze checking Connall's position and stance, and then roving once over the magical setup. The spellcaster nodded decisively. "Walk sunwise around the circle of staffs, and whatever you do," he pointed his finger at him, "do not stop until the magic is complete. Ye have the charm stone that will return ye, aye?" Connall fingered the small incised object in the pouch belted to his side, the smooth surface cooling the pads of his fingers. Even this wee object seemed to pulse with magic. "I do." Mungan pointed to Connall's left. "Then walk." He paced across the slanted expanse of magic stone, and Mungan chanted words that were mostly lost in the wind, but snatches caught his ear, ringing eerily clear. "Two souls lost, separated in the breadth of eternity, united by—" Heavier and heavier his steps became, as the spellcaster's words slipped through the thickening air to reach his ears. Panic clutched his heart, but he gritted his teeth and sought his battle-ready calm. Of a certainty, this venture would be as fraught with danger as one with swords and blood and might. As he made the next pass around the circle, the solstice sun's rays brightened to a painful degree, and he squinted. His body, by all the gods and goddesses, it was as if his bones had turned to stone. He dragged a leg forward, and it landed with a thud. Next leg forward, thud. He concentrated on moving each muscle in his body, the Druid's words admonishing him to not stop still, animating him forward despite the struggle. Thud, thud. Sound grew muffled and distorted till it all but disappeared, and his heart punched against his ribs with each weighted step. He could neither see nor hear. But then the Druid's voice pierced through the thickening, blinding veil shrouding him. "Remember, you hail from a land called Scotland." Scotland. 'Twas a strange word, and a strange name it was for their land, but he'd not question it. The Druid might be young, but he was wise. Connall stumbled forward and boom! A pressure smacked his torso and legs, and sound rushed into his ears. The blinding light morphed to black as night, and true fear grabbed his soul as he opened his eyes wide. Light and sound swirled and resolved, and his knees buckled under him, making him stumble down. An unfamiliar green knoll. Where? Using the downward momentum, Connall regained his footing by running. At the bottom of the steep hill, he sat, his breath soaring in and out as if he'd fought an army of warriors single-handedly. The dread he'd experienced earlier at the Druid's evasiveness now settled into his belly like a weighted stone. For the sight before him was... He pulled in a shaky breath, his pulse beating a frantic rhythm. Well, it was unlike anything he'd ever seen. The stench, oily and smoky. The noise, discordant and piercing. And the sight. Mother of all his ancestors, alien it was. More people than he'd ever witnessed at even the largest tribal gathering, pushed past one another on a smooth road of rock. Chariots, colourful and shiny, zoomed nearby, faster than any horse, and pulled along as if by magic. And the people, they were dressed even more strangely. Colourful fabric cut in unusual patterns and sewn with great skill, their skin and hair coloured vibrantly. In the distance stretched a dull red line, arcing through the air and flanked by two ladder-like structures. He frowned. The scale was odd. What was it? Then he gasped. It was a bridge, unlike any stone causeway or ford he'd trodden, stretching across a vast loch. How skilled were these people? Connall dug his fingers into the grassy soil and swallowed, throat dry, then jumped to his feet, slapping his hand at his side. Instead of meeting the hilt of his greatsword, he encountered cloth. He stared down at his person, and goosebumps broke out along his skin. Gone were his great kilt and sandals, and in their place was a tartan wrapped around his hips, and the heaviest shoes upon his feet, crisscrossed with string. He held out his arms and smoothed a palm down his forearm, marvelling at the soft cloth covering his upper body. A leather satchel hung at his side, held by a strap from his opposite shoulder.
"What have ye done, mungin?"
A couple strolled by in their peculiar attire, chattering away in a strange language, for the cadence was unfamiliar. But as they drew near, despite not knowing the shape of the words, he understood their meaning perfectly, and marvelled at the strength of the young Druid's magic. Connall turned in a circle, taking in the cacophony of sight and sound and the multitude of people.
"You were right to send me here, mungin,"
he whispered into the still winter air, his breath clouding it white, for women were everywhere. And then his heart chilled to match the frigid air, because the words which had emerged from his mouth were not their customary shape. Creek. The sooner he found his wife, the sooner he could leave this strange and smelly place with its peculiar word shapes. Besides, the Druid warned him he had to accomplish his task before 2 full moons passed, or the tether would weaken, and he'd no longer remember home. All stated with a matter-of-factness that had further unnerved him. Connall strode to the edge of the tightly shorn, uniform grass where it bordered the arrow-straight stone path across which everyone strode. A nice-enough-looking lass strolled by, staring at an object in her hand.
"Will ye be me wife? I'll treat ye well, never fear,"
he said in the strange words. He thought it best to reassure them on that fact, and then he stared. She'd passed him without ever looking up from her hand. Was his voice not working in the Druid's magic? It was disconcerting to think word shapes in one way and have them come out differently and still understand them, despite their unfamiliarity. He placed his hands on his hips and used the voice that made his warriors stand straighter.
"Hearken unto me."
Startled faces glanced his way. Aye, his voice was in fine working order. But instead of stopping and paying heed, as they should, each and every one continued past, and either looked at their hands, as they all seemed inclined to do, or talked to themselves, a hand at their ear. He tried again, infusing his voice with more authority.
"I'm searching for a wife for my hearth."
Most continued on as before, as if he were invisible. But one man slowed, his brow furrowed in concern.
"You're looking for your wife?"
Connall approached, his steps eager.
"Aye." "Where'd you last see her? Is she not answering your call?" "I haven't yet met her, and I'm calling for one now, aren't I?"
Connall waved his hand toward the seething mass of humanity. The man stepped back, eyes round, and scuttled past, shaking his head. What was so difficult to understand? He'd been assured by the lasses in his life that he was pleasant enough looking, and he was surely strong enough to take care of one,
unlike most of these sticks scurrying past. With that thought to hand, he approached the next lass, who appeared to be of childbearing age, though 'twas hard to look at her, for her lips, cheeks, and eyes had a sharpness of colour he'd never seen before, as if she had the hues of a butterfly's wing on her face. "Will ye consent to be my wife and return with me to my land?" Remembering the Druid's words, he added, "It's called Scotland." The woman only stared and said, "Freak." Each time he approached a likely lass, he was met with the same, or with laughter or weird looks. Truly, it was enough to wound his pride. A man approached him, all in black with tools strapped around his waist. "I'm going to need to ask you to leave the park, mister. I'm getting complaints of harassment." He carried himself with the authority of a chief, though he was a bit soft around the waist to be a warrior for these people. "Harassment. You can't stand here asking random women to marry you." He crossed his arms and glanced around. "Is this for some reality show or a YouTube stunt? You need a permit for this kind of thing." Connall shook his head, unsure of the man's meaning, his druid's magic failing him for the first time. "Well, knock it off, all right?" The man stepped away, muttering under his breath. Only the words, "cold" and "brings out the weirdos," reaching Connall. As he departed, a young lad approached at an alarming speed on a flat, wheeled board. Connall grabbed his upper arm before he could dash past. "Hey, watch it!" the lad barked, his eyes flashing in annoyance. But as he took in Connall towering above him, his eyes widened, and he yanked two white things from his ears. "Keep your hands to yourself." "Where can I procure a wife?" Pride be gone. Surely a man his age would know. The lad stepped on the edge of the board, snapping it up into his palm. "I don't know, dude. Try Craigslist." He shook his head, hopped back onto the wheeled board, and rolled away, dodging between the strolling people. Connall didn't know who or where Craig was, but if he had a list of available wives, he would find him. He gazed around at the bizarre people and behaviour. Aye, the sooner the better. Chapter 2. As night descended, Connall worked his way back to the only haven he'd seen since appearing in this land, the stretch of shorn grass and hill he'd tumbled down. He'd not dared stray too far in his search for a wife. His inquiries as to where he could procure this Craig's list of wives had proven baffling, the words peppering the answers not finding a meaning in his head. He'd try again in the morn. Meanwhile, he needed a place to lay his head. Knee-high platforms dotted the area, and on them stretched various sleeping forms. While these were indeed an improvement upon his own palate, he had to question the wisdom of sleeping with no shelter overhead. Did it not rain in this land? Or perhaps these were set out for travellers, so they wouldn't have to sleep on the ground. With that thought easing him, he approached one of the few empty beds and put his hand to his kilt. He grunted. This was not enough to wrap around himself. Hand still poised at the leather binding it to his waist, he studied the other sleepers. All kept themselves clothed. He curled his lip. So be it. He tucked an arm under his head and settled in. The constant noise, however, kept him from closing his eyes. How could these people sleep with this continuous din? A tinkling sound grew louder, separating itself from the rest, and he angled his chin to see what new strangeness approached. A man aged at least 100 winters hobbled toward him, two animals trotting beside him. Though of a different form, not only to each other, but to any that he'd ever seen,
The general lines told him these was some manner of dog.
"It's not safe to sleep here, young man."
The older man motioned to the left.
Come, follow me. There's an extra bed at my shelter."
Connall studied the newcomer, struck by a sense of familiarity, despite his age.
"Mungin."
Even as he said the name, he knew it wasn't their spellcaster. The nose, while similar, was longer, the jaw less square. The man placed his hand to his heart and tipped forward slightly.
"Norton, Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico."
Emperor? He knew leaders of some distant lands held such a title, and he was humbled to have come across this land's ruler so soon. Mungan's magic had come through for him.
"The magic will provide equivalents for you."
And while relief flooded him, it was laced with a feeling of averting a danger he hadn't fully realized he'd faced. For Mungan to provide such magic meant he'd have been out of his depth otherwise.
"What did this cost you, hearth brother?"
1 week later.
"Come on, just a little farther,"
Ashley Miller murmured as the F-Line streetcar slowed its approach to the stop at 5th and Powell. Close enough. But before she took the leap, she surveyed the faces waiting at the stop or strolling by. None were the 2 hired goons searching for her. Goons. Such an outdated and melodramatic term, but that was her life right now, wasn't it? When she first learned last month that, in addition to being saddled with her ex-husband's debts, a bookie was also tracking her down to make her pay another one, she wanted to divorce his ass all over again and then drop-kick him from the Golden Gate Bridge. It was why she preferred taking the streetcar with the tourists instead of BART. Despite the higher price tag, it gave her the freedom to get off quicker than a bus, and no one would expect a resident to use one daily. When would one of her shit-ton of job applications come through? But wouldn't they just trace her to wherever she landed? She shouldered her messenger bag and hopped off the side, just as her phone dinged with a text. She pulled it up. Sweet, an Etsy sale. She shoved her way through the just-got-off-work crowd, angling toward the 3-story former warehouse turned hipster mishmash of upscale condos, shared office space, and the section within she was temporarily calling home, a pod share. Jesus, I hope not for much longer, she muttered. With rents so high in San Francisco, this was all she could afford, but it was clean and safe, so she put up with it. God, she just wanted to lie down and sleep for 5 days. Was that too much to ask? This morning, her software engineering team had grated and frayed her last nerve, second-guessing everything and acting as if this wasn't their zillionth test run on the code. 1 more week, and then I can sleep. And she was talking to herself. Yep, she needed some frigging rest. She pushed against the glass door and stepped into the warm tones of the podshare, an artsy combo of paint, exposed wood and brick, and slate chalkboards adorned with colourful, inspirational quotes. Cards Against Humanity game night tonight. Sign up here, declared one. Why do you love podshare living? Asked another, with scribbles below in various handwriting. And because the place was run like a well-oiled machine, the Christmas decorations had been taken down while she'd been at work, and replaced with a space to write New Year's resolutions. Writing, "Get out of this podshare and dodge the bookies," probably wouldn't go over well. She walked past them, pulled open her locker, and shoved her messenger bag onto the top shelf. She removed her fishing tackle box full of beads and other crafting supplies. She'd better fill the order now, while she was still mostly awake, rather than wait until she got off her bistro shift later.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?